Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. I'm your host, Melvin Casey Lars, and this evening, guys, as always, we have a very exciting show for you. We have a very dynamic guest, and we want to say all of our guests are dynamic. However, this evening, this guest, Dr. George McKenna, is a man for the ages, and he is the real deal. Now, let's just tell you just a smidgen about Dr. George McKenna. Now, Dr. George McKenna was born in New Orleans into a family that was steeped deeply in the culture and history of the city. At the age of 20, he received a BA in mathematics from Xavier University and was awarded a teaching fellowship to Loyola University, where he earned an MA in mathematics. He also holds a Doctor of Education degree from Xavier University. In 1962, McKenna accepted a teaching position in the Los Angeles Unified School District while continuing his education at Loyola University Law School, the University of California, Los Angeles, and California State University at Los Angeles. McKenna remained a teacher, working at both the secondary and college levels. McKenna became a principal of George Washington Preparatory High School in 1979. At the time, this high school was one of the most notorious and violent in Los Angeles, replete with gangs, drug dealing, and gunfights. McKenna and his reform tactics turned George Washington Preparatory High School around, transforming it from a failing institution to one where nearly 80% of its graduates went on to college. McKenna's programs have been modeled throughout the nation. He has served as a consultant to numerous school districts and law enforcement agencies. He is also the author of several articles that have appeared in local and national newspapers and educational editorials and journals. McKenna has received more than 400 guys, yes, 400 citations and awards from civic, legislative, and professional organizations. His work led to his being the subject of the award-winning CBS movie, The George McKenna Story, starring Denzel Washington. Yes, that Denzel Washington. In 1989, McKenna received the Congressional Black Caucus's Chairman's Award, and 1997 was selected into the National Alliance of Black School Educators' Hall of Fame. Yes. What do you think it would be like to be elected to an educational Hall of Fame? So, guys, listen, tonight we're not going to waste your time with me continuing to babble here. We want to introduce you to the outstanding Dr. George McKenna, and he's going to be talking to us about education. And our topic tonight is education reform. Is it a reality or a pipe dream? Now, we do warn you, because of technical difficulties, Dr. McKenna's talk will initially start in progress. Sit back, relax, and help us welcome Dr. George McKenna.
And the outreach to the home so that the parents are pulled into it, not disparaged because they don't know what to do. You have to also educate the home, especially for underperforming children and children who have generational poverty and generational lack of education in their neighborhood, in their bloodline, in their family tree. Nobody ever graduated from high school. Certainly nobody didn't go to college. Nobody went to college. And then very few have graduates in their family. So my mission when I became a principal, and I worked in a lot of other schools, was to make sure that those kids fought to come to my school as opposed to fight to get out of it. And there's some very specific things that teachers need to do. And they have to teach in the classroom. Don't shine the kids on it. It's great to make them feel good, but if you don't teach them to read, to write paragraphs and express themselves, not just talk, speak the King's English so they know what you're talking about, and mathematics, which was my field, you're not doing them not doing them a favor. And I've been in schools where they celebrated their athletics achievement, and yet the kids still weren't going to college. And that's a shame. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the ethnicity of the teacher. It has to do with the quality of the education, because white teachers can teach black kids, and black teachers can teach white kids, and black teachers can miseducate black kids, and white teachers can miseducate black kids. It's easy to miseducate children, just don't try hard and scream that. And maybe something magical will happen. Won't happen. You have to be forensic about it and refuse to quit and push those kids. Bring them in on the weekend, keep them after school. Tell their parents, no, I'm not letting them go home at 3 o'clock. You still can't read the way you're supposed to read. And teachers have to commit to that, and we can't pay them any more money, but you have to get the right teachers who are willing to make that extra sacrifice. It's a sacrifice, it really is.
You know, Doc, as you share that, and actually, this perfect segue into the next question. There, you know, do you feel that holistically we do justice to our children when we are explaining to them the importance of getting an education?
No, we don't. We don't do it well enough. We don't even know our own history. We think that they stay in school for 12 years, that's called an education. But what did you learn in that process? Were you just promoted and just moved to the next grade level because you were just backing up? I mean, back in the day, they'd keep you in elementary school till you were damn near voting, you know? And you got a grown man still sitting in the 8th grade. I remember some of those old people that were sitting there, they just couldn't, the teachers couldn't teach them. Now, and it wasn't the fault of the student. I don't believe there's a human being that can't learn. I do believe there are people that can't teach. And some of us have teaching credentials and can't teach. I can teach anybody, but you can't teach that child. And what's wrong with that? What is it going to take to teach? So the teachers have to work together on the faculty, because you got to work on the faculty in that school. Can't worry about the whole world. In your school where you work, what does the faculty do collectively to address the children that are not getting it? And there's an old mantra. There's 3 things you do when you have staff development, professional development, faculty meetings, like the math department meets or the 3rd grade teachers meet. You ask 3 questions. First question, what are we trying to teach between the next 2 weeks to 3 weeks? Second, what methods are we going to use to teach this? Are we going to just lecture? We're going to have group practice? How are we going to do this? What are the various strategies? And we can watch each other teach. We need to visit each other's classrooms. And the 3rd question, what are we going to do differently for the kids that are not getting it? Or does it matter if they're not getting it? We just keep failing them. I know what to do, and I failed him. And that's all I needed to do. But when he or she fails, the teacher fails. Right? It's like the doctor letting patients die on the operating table and say, oh, well, bring the next one in. I'm going to kill him too. I couldn't save him, so I bring another one in. And when these kids get away from us without being well educated, extremely well educated, we do them a disservice because they can't come back. They can't come back to the 5th grade. They can't come back to the 8th grade, the 9th, the 11th grade. They can't come back. Once they're gone, they're gone. And sometimes we're just glad they're gone. And that's a disservice. Teaching is a personal thing. You got to fall in love with teaching, and you got to fall in love with your subjects. And the kids will love you back. Having been a principal and a dean and a disciplinarian and a teacher in the classroom, I knew what it was for my kids to be in love with me. I knew they loved me, and I loved them in return. And love is more powerful than fear, and respect is more powerful than making kids afraid of you because you're the disciplinarian. You're the principal. You can put them out of school and all that foolishness. Why put them out? You're not doing them a favor by putting them out. I know they're a pain in the butt, but it's your pain and it's their butt, so why are you getting rid of them? Because when you send them someplace else, it's not going to be better over there. You're just washing your hands of the situation, and you're creating a different problem. And I admit our children, some of us have significant challenges, but that's why we signed on to this thing called teaching. It's a loving experience. The teaching is one of the more difficult jobs in the world. My police officer friend said, Jock, we got the toughest job. I said, no, you might have a dangerous job, but your job is not tougher than teaching. He said, what you mean by that? I said, I'll tell you what. Take off your helmet and your gun and your dark glasses and come teach a kindergarten class and see how long you last with your bad self, right? And they started laughing. I said, tell you what, once those little 5-year-olds decide you're not so bad out, you can leave the gun on. They don't care. They'll be running all over the place. You can't control them. And try to teach them every day because they're squirrely, take them to the bathroom, all this. Try to teach a 5th grade class. When they start talking back, talking about, you can't tell me what to do, that kind of stuff, But when you love kids, you understand they have the same process every year. They just have different faces, but they have the same issues. They become adolescents, they become teenagers, and hopefully at some point, you can turn them into mature young adults. I don't really know when you mature. I'm still trying, but I believe that great teachers are harder to find than just people who think teaching is easy. And they just give grades to kids, but they don't teach them. And that's a sad part. We've seen some examples in the country where teachers, I won't call out the district, I mean, it was all over the news, but teachers went to jail fixing the grades, you know, they're messing with the test and bubbling in and changing grade, like they can't teach these children.
Yes.
It's not that the children are unteachable, it's that the professionals are unable to teach. And they're admitting that. So instead of saying it's on us, they blame it on the kids. They blame it on poverty. They blame it on the absentee father. They blame it on the mama who's unemployed. They blame it on, you know, too many kids in the family. They blame it on the rain. They blame it on the neighborhood. They blame it on the Crips. They blame it on all this kind of stuff, you know. I mean, I was in the school for 10 years when they made this movie, where the Crips gang was born on this campus. People are afraid to come to the school. They had a waiting list to get out on the bus, going to the valley, integrating. By the time I got out there, we had a waiting list to get in. Same school, building in the same place, same neighborhood. It was just hard work. People call it a miracle. But I had to get some different people in there, some different adults, because the kids are the same. You know, they'll believe whatever you tell them. You have to be the right one to tell it to them, though. They won't believe everybody. But once they believe in you, you can make them do some interesting things that they never thought they could do.
But, you know, Doc, as you share that, it always amazes me every time, you know, I kind of look at the movie again and think back, and I have it here, by the way, and we're going to talk about it some more tonight. But, you know, I always wondered, after having the opportunity to work with you and be a part of your staff and really learn from you, and allow me to say, before I ask this question, is that, as I alluded to earlier, people think sometimes that you may say nice things about people because it's appropriate at the time. But in my experience, and watching the way you talk to those children, watching the way you dealt with them, the way you dealt with parents, I want to ask you this question tonight specifically for our audience. And that question is, are we addressing the needs of parents to really grasp what getting an education is?
Not sufficiently. Most of our parents whose kids struggle, and I don't blame them, but at the same time, I have to hold them responsible. They can't just drop their kids off in kindergarten and wait 12 years and hope to pick out a graduate by the time they graduate. They never show up, you know? They only show up if we suspend the child, which should be unnecessary. They don't come often enough. They're working parents, I got that. So we haven't really come up with a model where the parents can come after school on a regular basis without their child being in trouble and get some education on how to help your child. Not to be the educator, take the place of the teacher, but to supplement what we're doing. So when we send homework home, make sure that they try to do it. And those kinds of things. And keep them coming to school every day. We have kids that come 3 days a week and they think they're doing fine because all their neighbors do the same thing. And the boys, you know, they get caught up in gangs and they use a place called school to relate to each other. That's where they hook up, you know. I'll see you at third period. And they go out there on the yard and they know where they sit in the same cluster every day. You know right where they are. So you go sit right next to them, Mel, so they can't talk that gang stuff, right? Hey, fellas, how's it going today? Oh, man, that is again, right? But later on, they thank you, you know, because you can break that stuff up. So no, the parents are really the equation we haven't really solved. How to get the parents involved. And the parents that are already well educated, they involve themselves. You have to chase them away. They bring the lawyer with them. You know, they're not gonna let you miseducate their child because they know the difference. But the uneducated parent sometimes doesn't know. And when you call them, they say, why are you calling me? I send them to you and hang up on you. That kind of stuff, you know. And it's sad, but then I tell the teachers, what did you do now? The parent hung up on you until they don't want to be bothered. What do you do? They say, I said, no, I'll tell you what you do. You call them back. And you call them back tomorrow. And you call them back the next day. You make a nuisance of yourself. And let them know you care about them and you care about their child and that you will not stop calling them. Because if they win, the child loses. Don't let them win. And you got to fight with parents, you know, in a respectful way. Not an insulting way, but you have to be diplomatic about it, to try to turn their adversarial nature into being an ally with you on behalf of their child. It takes a lot more time, but what else you got to do, right?
You're right, because you know what, Doc, wow. You know, I know that there's so much I could talk to you about. I'm trying to be respectful of your time and stay with that. Wow, man, this is heavy. Actually, it segues into our next question here. Now, would you say that one of our major problems in education is poor preparation of our teachers or apathy with our students.
Yeah, I think teacher preparation is one of the failings, because we do something called professional development. What does a university do that then requires us to have to train them more? I thought the university was supposed to prepare you to be a teacher, but no, they just gave you a piece of paper and said, now go be a teacher. Well, you're not a teacher until there's kids in the classroom, right? You know all the theory you want, learn your subject. I know my subject. That doesn't make you a teacher. I worked as an engineer for NASA, putting the man on the moon. None of those guys in there, and it was all men. I didn't even know the women existed until I saw the movie, Hidden Figures. They were on the East Coast. I was out here with NASA in Los Angeles, working as an engineer on the Apollo shot. But everybody can't teach, Melvin. Everybody can't teach. Everybody with a credential can't teach. And so we have done a poor job of preparing teachers to teach the child, not the subject. You teach the child, not the subject. You can, back in the day when we had the blackboard and I was on, I'm there covered with chalk dust, and teaching numbers and trigonometry and geometry and just arithmetic and stuff like that. And if the children are not learning it, if you don't test for mastery, you just talk to the board. You've got to make sure they're getting it. So you have to probe them and aggravate them sometimes, stimulate them, initiate their responsiveness and participation in their own emancipation. Otherwise, they're just figures, and you give them a grade, you give them a failing grade. You have to be tenacious and not refuse to let them fail. Because when they fail, that means I failed. When I was in the classroom, I love teaching in the classroom. And I don't know why I ever left it. I had more fun doing that than anything. There was never a dull day, Kids make you laugh all day long. Yeah.
You and me both. Doc, as we go to the next question, I'm so happy to see Mr. Charles Burton. I have been blessed. I've been blessed to be doing some work with Mr. Charles Burton. He's written a book about substance abuse for children called, It's Not Me, It's a Trap. And he often asks questions of different things about teaching and how to get things across. And I'm so happy that he's here because, Mr. Burton, if you have any questions for Dr. McKenna, please feel free to ask. But I'm so happy that he's here because I want him to hear from the master. Because I've been trying to share in part some information, but
I can see Mr. Burton, so I'd be willing to, please go right ahead, sir.
I'm here to listen and learn. That's I missed the first 20 minutes. I couldn't get my volume on, but I'm honored to be here. So you guys proceed.
Thank you, sir. One of the things I want to tell people, when you really want to improve teacher performance, one of the best things they can do, you have to even force them, even cover that class. Let teachers visit other teachers and watch them teach. The best way to learn how to teach is watch another teacher teach. You can read a book about teaching. You can read a book about swimming. Don't jump in the water because you read a book about swimming and you couldn't swim before. You're not going to go very far. You're going to drown. You need to go watch somebody swim and have somebody hold your hand while you do it. And don't be afraid to go visit each other in the same building or another building without being evaluated. Just watch what I do. And then you identify the master teachers where people can come and go without interrupting. Watch what they do in the classroom, how they get the child's attention, how they test for do they understand. We call it test for mastery. After you explained it, now say, now what did I tell you? What do you know? And anybody got any questions? And nobody raises their hand. That doesn't mean they understand. They're afraid to raise their hands. So you got to provoke them. You got to have a sense of humor too. It's one of the best weapons a teacher can have is a sense of humor. Especially when they start teasing you about stuff, you can't get mad and send them to the dean. They got kids are sassy anyway, right? Just have to be okay with that. Right. So, and it's a personal thing. You can't see these children as just a place where you get your paycheck. It's a personal thing when you teach in the classroom. And when you're the principal of the school, you got to get to know them very well and who's in what groups and stimulate them to do something. Make them join clubs. Go in there and join the band. I can't play anything. Okay, they'll teach you how to play something. What you want to play? You want to play the drum? You want to play the horn? You want to play the piano? Somebody will teach you that. You don't have a piano at home. I know you don't have anything at home. But here's where you can learn it in the band. I had a great band director. He came and he turned out my band into they won the championship like 3 years. And I was only there 10
Wow.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I came there, the band had 15 kids, 15 students in the band, and 9 of them were drummers. That's how pitiful it
15.
was.
Wow.
He built it up. We had like 70, 80 kids in the band, right?
Okay.
But his name was Fernando Pullum. He's still around. He's a musician. And they named a couple of schools after him. He's still out here in LA. Good, great guy. But I believe that teachers can make a difference. They're the most important people in the world because we shape minds and values. And for us, as Black people, education has to be the top priority because it was the one thing that they refused to give us when we were property, not an education. You could feed us, you could clothe us in rags and house us in a barn or someplace like that, and work us and sell us and all of that, but they wouldn't educate us because they knew if we get educated, we know what freedom looked like, set the mind free. And so when kids come to school, we have public schools, and I'm still an advocate of public schools. I don't believe we need to privatize public schools. But if that's a good alternative, I don't mind that. If you open up a charter school or you open up a private school and you're doing a better job than me, I'm okay with that. As long as you're educating the kids. If you can beat me rocking, you can take my chair. I have no problem with that, right? But if you're not, all you're doing is sucking the ADA, average daily attendance, money from it to enrich yourself, and the kids are still not learning, it's a charade. And so I'm still believing that a public education, a free, equal public education is necessary in America. And we ought to have a much more equitable outcome rather than just equal. Because equal means we get the same stuff, but we might not have the same outcomes. Equity means fair. Give me what I need. Because you had me behind for so long. That's what affirmative action was all about. But that's people don't want to have affirmative action, right?
Right.
And I can say this, it's a political thing as well. You know, there are politics in education, there are teacher unions, there are other kinds of things that come into it. I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. I don't have to coach, I don't have to do this. And I know teachers need unions. I think unions are necessary for teachers to make sure that their working conditions are great, but not to defend them when they're ineffective and try to defend ineffective teachers and say, well, we're all equal, but you're not all equal. If I had my way, I'd pay teachers different amounts of money based upon their outcomes. How many students fight to get in your class, right? Maybe you're worth more. I mean, sometimes the quarterback makes more money than the left guard, right? That doesn't mean he's a better player.
Absolutely.
That's right. We know that. You in the line. I know that. So I know that, but it's not going to work that way because the politics gets in the way. And I think that it's very important. We were talking about that before they came on. It's very important that people vote in this election coming up in November. We have some insanity going on in the White House. And one of the things that I noticed in these movements that are coming up and people are protesting police abuse, and police abuse should be protested. Back in the day, when I was coming through school and the local sheriffs and the local police departments would abuse us from Bull Connor to those people down there with the hoses and the dogs and all. And I was in some of those marches as a child, as a teenager. From Dwight Eisenhower on, they sent the federal government down there to tell the governor to back off. Now, the president says he's going to use the federal government to come in and run the protesters away. So we can't count on the federal government anymore. You see? The federal government will become the oppressor, as opposed to the last court of last resort, when we're getting abused by local police forces and all that. And police are necessary. I'm not saying police, yes. There's some great police out there, but at the same time, if we get killed for just talking back, you know, or just being black, you know, yeah. Just any old thing, just don't talk, don't look at me, you know, get on your knees, and all this kind of stuff. And then because we don't respond appropriately, we wind up dead. So, so I think that we have to vote this November. We can protest, but if you're protesting and you ain't voting, you ain't done nothing.
You know what, Doc? I'm happy that you said that, because I want to ask you this. I want to ask you this question, and I want to ask it because of all of the things that you're saying all of the debate and people going back and forth and, well, you know, it's not based on race and the public schools are not doing this and they're failing our kids and that kind of thing. So this question as an educator, and I know that we're talking to the guru tonight, is a question that's very near and dear to me. And I ask people all the time, and I'm asking Dr. McKenna, how much credibility, if any, can we give to those that are spouting educational policies but have no background in education, and they themselves are limited as it references being formally educated?
Well, you know, people can sell a lot of stuff, and people buy a lot of stuff, right? You can look at reality TV, and that's how the president got there, selling nonsense, right? Just mouthing off, selling books, whatever he's selling, you know, selling. I won't use the word in front of the audience, right? And I know it. I know it when I see it. They lack credibility. The one common denominator that you need to look at when you say we want to give the kids what they need. The one thing we've not done is give sufficient resources, not just more resources, not more federal funding. Have you given adequate resources? You know, we talk about equity. Equity is not the same as adequacy. You know, if we're in a race and I have no shoes and you got track shoes on and you're going to get out there blocks before I do, it's going to be hard for me to catch you unless I got a God-given talent like Usain Bolt. But everybody ain't like that, right? I need some track shoes. So you give me one shoe. Well, you got one more shoe than you had last time. I only got one. But I don't have adequacy. I need sufficiency. And you need to help me catch up because the guy in front's not going to slow down. So why should he? I should be able to make up the difference. And that's the hard part, making up the gap. Instead of saying, let's just accept the gap and give prizes to the ones that are better at the lower end. And I've seen that. It's a terrible phrase to use, but I use it, getting an award for being the best of the pitiful, you know? A whole bunch of underperforming schools, and they're all underperforming, but the one gets an award because it's better than the other underperforming school. But we never compare ourselves to the ones in the top quartile because we don't even expect to get there. We don't. I mean, here's a little award for being the best of the pitiful. Now, that's not what the award says, but that's what I call it. It's disrespectful, but it's real for me.
Wow. You know, Doc, that wow. Now you're talking about a gem. That's a gem because sadly, that's what happens too many times in education. And as with, if I can tie the two in, and because I think they are already a part of one another. When we talk about athletics and that kind of thing, and when we talk about education and people try to separate athletes and talk about student athletes and all that nonsense, because to me, it's nonsense. You're already a student, that's understood, and you happen to be an athlete, and when you use those terms together, then you are making a statement, I feel, that is intended to separate, that you're not supposed to be able to be proficient at one and the other. So I say that when you say you're getting an award for the pitiful, is that we oftentimes play that up too heavily. And learning from you and sitting at your feet and watching you work with our students and watching the things that you do and how you carry yourself and that type thing. As I said earlier, I mean, you changed my whole perception because I really was, Doc. I was getting fed up. I'm like, you know, man, these people are not serious about helping these children. These children are just flopping around and they're just doing a lot of talking. When the cameras are on and the newspapers are out and the TV cameras are out, everybody's talking about, oh, we want the best for your children. And the moment those cameras go off and it's right, it's back to normal. And normal is what you just said. It's just getting an award for the pitiful. It's a sad thing.
Yeah, and I think that having been an athlete myself, I played 4 sports in high school and 2 at the university, the basketball and baseball player. I think we often don't hold the coaches accountable for the power they have. When you're playing on a team, the coach is God. We know that, right? And when you respect that coach, you do anything that you run through a wall, right? If he tells me, run through Melvin Lawrence, I said, Melvin, I weigh me about 200 pounds. Put your head down, Mac. You wake up in the hospital, right? Okay, coach, you told me what to do, right? So the coach also has to be an insister of excellence in the classroom. One of the better examples I know, because I never met the guy, and he recently died, John Thompson at Georgetown. He insisted that all of his athletes had a tutor, they had to go to class, or they couldn't play. Some of them had to drop out. I had one of them come out of Compton when I worked in Compton. He was a great little guard. He quit at Christmas time. He was leading the league in the conference in assists and all of that, and he quit because he wouldn't go to class. And he assigned a tutor. He wouldn't go with the tutor, so he just dropped out. But John Thompson pushed them to stay in school. He nurtured them. I'm sure there are a lot of other coaches that do the same thing. And the high school coaches sometimes, if you're going to come to school and go and you practice from 3 o'clock in the afternoon when classes are over until 5 o'clock in the evening, go home tired, you know, you're playing football or whatever you're playing, you're wearing yourself out, you take a shower, you fall asleep, you still have to make time for that homework and that extra stuff. So you have to say, before we hit the field, let's work on our schedule. Let's work on our assignments for the day and bring some teachers in to help do the tutoring and the nurturing so that your athletes understand we're still students first. Yeah, I know you're going to get cheered on the field and all that. They're going to put your name up and you get the girls chasing you and all of this. But, you know, like I used to tell the girls, I said, look, these boys think they're heroes because they play athletics. And they tell you you look like this and you're cute and you think he's attractive and all that. And I tell it to the high school girl. And I'll tell it, I'll tell it to people right here. When a girl is looking at a young man and she's interested in him and he says, to come and tell you how great he is and all of this, I said, there's one thing you can ask him for that will tell you most of what you really need to know. When he tell you, I got the keys to the car, I got some shandies, I got some good clothes and all this kind of stuff. I said, ask him for his report card. That's what you need to ask him for. That'll tell you what he's really serious about. He got a whole bunch of D's and fails on his report card, but he's a hero on the basketball team, That tells you, ladies, what you're looking at here now, right? So don't let your eyes deceive you. Ask him for his report card. Don't let him tell you, look at it. See how often these apps and all this kind of, that's going to tell you somebody's character. And they laugh. I tell it to the boys too. I say, you should be willing to show the girl your report card. If you're all that in a bag of chips, show your report card. Fess up to what you're doing. Right?
I feel you.
Yeah.
Doc, as you share that, I want to say it on this medium because, as I said, we are talking to the guru. And I won't call any schools and embarrass anybody, but you've hit the nail on the head when you talk about coaches being accountable. I will say this much. I returned back to our beloved Shreveport, Louisiana. I took a position at a particular school. There was no problem as long as I was having to confront gang members with loaded guns, but it was a major problem when I was advocating and raising Cain because my athletes were not being academically prepared. And you have said these things, and I'm so happy that you're saying it, so that people can hear from the guru, because it is very important. And I tell people all the time, and again, these are just things that I observed, man. I will repeat myself, and if people don't want to hear me say it, I'm sorry. But these are things I reserved in the time I was there. I saw a real principal. I saw a real administrator that actually cared about children, etc. I was blessed to have had one of those gentlemen when I was an athlete myself in school. So I wanted to emulate that, and in seeing those kinds of attitudes when we were actually murdering children without accepting the fact that if we were not preparing them academically, then you were setting them, and you said it earlier, that we're setting them up to fail. So I returned, and this was after I'd come back from working for you and working some other places, and it was just amazing to me how people that were supposed to be helping me help the students grow were my main adversaries. I feel
you. I can share this story with you. When I was a vice principal, I won't say which school, I noticed how many students, athletes, were doing poorly in their academics. So at that school, I decided, because I could do it, you had to have a C average in order to participate in athletics. Oh, the coaches were outraged. How are you going to force them to have a C average? I said, because they came to school to learn, not just to play football. So I'm going to do that. So if they don't have a C average, they can't suit up. The kids were upset and all that. We did it anyway. One of the board members at the time, she thought that was a great idea. She got it passed at the state level. So in the state of California now, in the California Interscholastic Federation, everybody has to have a C average to participate in athletics, right? So you can't just walk out there with straight D's and fails on your report card, which I thought was at least something to say, you ought to be accountable for this. I know he's a great athlete, he's a stud and all of that, but can he read, right? Can he even read his contract if he got a contract? Can he write a paragraph? Can he describe who he is in the King's English, in English, in grammatically constructed sentences? We can teach those skills. Those are skills. And so if we short shift the kids on behalf of our personal need as coaches, and I coach for a little bit myself, but I don't believe that all coaches really emphasize the academics. I was in some schools and I had to tell the coaches, I've noticed that boy, he's a great athlete, but when I look for him, he doesn't come to school until like 10 o'clock in the morning. He comes when he feels like it, and you don't bench him. He starts, all city and all that, but you don't. There's no consequences for him, right, coach? Well, I said, no, coach, you're the coach. You can take his uniform, you can sit him down. I said, guess what, coach? Guess who determines who the coach is? I do. He determines who plays in the game. But I'm the deputy superintendent. I get to determine whether you coach this team or not, right? And so let's understand where we are here with responsibility. I have a responsibility to hold you accountable, and you have a responsibility to hold that kid accountable. Otherwise, you're not doing him any favors. You turn him into just a machine, and you're exploiting him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's a place where once we realize what the problem is, we can try to solve it. But if you don't call it a problem and just call it a circumstance, because there's a difference between a problem and a circumstance. A problem is a situation that needs a solution. A circumstance is a situation that you just live with, like your height, like your age, right? Like your ethnicity. That's not a problem. You were born that way, right? But if you can't read, that's a problem. That's not just a circumstance that you adjust to. I'll just go through life not being able to read. And people will tell me what I need to know. Just like we got somebody in the White House. He doesn't read. People have to tell him what to do. He tries to read off the paper and then he goes on a riff. You can tell a man's limited. So they didn't educate him very well. He paid tuition and they gave him some little fake education. But they made him president of the United States. And the thing that scares me about that, he's got a chance to win again. Because the same people that voted for him last time will vote for him again. And some people will vote that didn't vote the last time because they didn't think he could win. He didn't think he could win. And they may outnumber us because they have I say it this way, they have a greater need to keep him in there and a greater fear of him not being there than we do of him being there. Because we know how to deal with an oppressor. So even if he's there for another 4 years, we still have to live with it, right? They couldn't stand that. He's only in there because there was a black Barack Obama in there for 8 years. They were outraged by that.
Right.
Like they had to give up their supremacy.
Sadly, but you're correct.
Yeah, he didn't get to do everything he could have done because they kept turning him down, saying no, calling him a liar, just interfering with everything. Now they're trying to erase everything he did. But the point is, there's still that supremacy out. And we grew up in the South because we know, Melvin, we know that when you live in California, those people think one way. Down there in Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, all those places, and all those legislators that are sanitizing and normalizing the foolishness that's going on in the White House, we got to get rid of them too. But it's hard. Unless you vote, you don't have a shot. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing is true about the democracy. We get to vote, but we get to vote for our dictators. That's the difference between that and a dictatorship, right? Because once we elect them, they can do all kind of crazy stuff to us rather than for us. But we do get to vote. And people say, well, my vote doesn't count. Everybody's vote counts. Mm-hmm. If your vote doesn't count, then you don't count. Mm-hmm. And if you don't count, then why are you here? You're right. You're just walking around, taking up space and using up my air. So we have to persuade our people to vote. Even if you're not voting for somebody, vote against something. If you don't know who to vote for, you ought to know who not to vote for. So vote for the other guy, right? The other people do the same thing. They know they don't want somebody in there, so they vote for this guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to be competent. They just don't want this other person in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Doctor, so, as you share that, I know I've kept you too long, but look, I have to ask you this question.
That's all right.
I have to ask you this question. Now, how difficult is it to sit at the table when you encounter, and I call them talking heads, when you encounter talking heads that try to pass themselves off as astute academician and education reformist? Now, I know at the beginning we talked about education reform, but I also know, knowing Dr. George McKenna III and the kind of man that you are and what you stand for, I'm sure you have been in situations with these individuals that try to pass themselves off as being these academicians and education reformers when they have no clue. How do you deal with that?
You can't deal with it as much as you can at least confront them with, if you're in the audience. If you're not there, then they write their books, they sell their books, they go make speeches around the country and all this kind of stuff. And none of them ever worked in the school like you and I do, right? They're at the university level. I can't disparage people who have their academic degrees and all of that. But if you're teaching teachers how to teach, the question is, did you ever teach yourself in those schools? If you're teaching a teacher how to teach middle school kids, did you ever teach those middle school kids yourself, professor? Or you just tell them the theory of education? It's hard for me to listen to them when they say it. Sometimes I have to hold myself, not completely to say nothing, but I have to be strategic in the arena that I am. I can't insult them in public, but I can call into question some of their theories. I'll never forget this. I was in a seminar, and I won't call the woman's name, but she wrote a book called The Culture of Poverty. And she sent a representative to give the speech in the district I was working. And I said to her, ma'am, I've been listening to you for 45 minutes. And I don't know that the poverty is a culture. Oppression is a culture. Poverty is a lack of money. So I could solve that tomorrow by giving them money. Then it wouldn't be poor. What would that culture be then? If that culture is they don't come to school, that has nothing to do with poverty. They got some other issues they're dealing with. So when you ascribe all these behaviors and attitudes because they're poor, they don't have resources. They don't have jobs. And you can't blame them for saying the culture of poverty, therefore teachers ought to be understanding how to deal with the culture. Poverty is not a culture. Poverty is a condition, right? I've been broke. I've never been poor, but I went to school. When I went to school, there were two types of kids down there in the segregated school. We were either poor or we were poor, you know. Fortunately, I wasn't poor. Right. I really wasn't. But everybody, we were either poor or poor, right? And we didn't have a lot. I remember one pair of shoes. You might have some cardboard in the sole, you know, to wrap it up with. So we made do with that. But teachers can make a great difference. Teachers can be the equalizer for what doesn't happen in the home. Now, teachers say, well, I'm not their parent. But you are like the parent. It's called local parentis. When they come to school, they belong to you. They'll believe in you. You could tell them fables and they'll believe it. Especially when they're young. You know, my teacher said, they come home and say, my teacher said, you know, the moon is made out of green cheese, right? You can make them laugh at all kinds of stuff because they love their teachers. And when they love you, that vulnerability, and they can be teenagers and love you too. They want to hug you. They need hugs too. And people say, you can't hug these kids, you know, that's child. I say, that's nonsense. You can't touch your children. And how can you relate to them? You can't shake their hands. If you don't touch them when they're not angry, how are you going to touch them when they're angry and want to fight? How are you going to put your hands on them now? They're not going to let you touch them. They don't know what you feel like. You got to be willing to, you know, give them an attaboy. You got a girl, that's the way to do it. You know, give them a pat on the back. Shake their hands, you know. This is a personal thing. And when you're a teacher, you have to see that these are my children. And there are many teachers that see it that way. I think there are more that see it that way, but they don't all have the resources. Because sometimes the class sizes are too large. So, well, you got 30 to 1. Yeah, but if they're all under non-readers, 30 non-readers in the same classroom, that's hard to do. Because to teach them to read, you have to individualize that sometimes. And it's not just, you know, pointing to the words. You have to take it in. Reading is not just memorizing words. It is using it in context. Reading is and the most powerful skill in an English teacher, some of the elementary teachers taught me this, that the most powerful skill is not reading, it is writing. Because it is through writing where you demonstrate your mastery of words that you have read. And it made sense when they said it to me, because I know a lot of people who can read who can't write. I don't know anybody who can write who can't read.
You can't read, right.
Because you need vocabulary to write, and you have to have read words that other people wrote about and how they phrase their words. So how can you express your ideas if you can't write? That's what rappers are doing. Rappers just making up stuff. Some of them don't make any sense. I don't know what they're talking about half the time. And they call it music. Nobody can play an instrument, but they call themselves musicians, right? I know what old school music is. I know what Otis Redding sang like, right? I know what Sam Cooke sang like. I know what Aretha sound like, right? That was music, right? They could play an instrument, they could sing. The point is, the writing is a powerful tool. And writing is the same kind of logic you use in mathematics, because it's problem solving to get the right sentence. And I wrote it the first time, I got to rewrite it to make sure it's grammatically correct. Because when you write, you're not writing for yourself. You're writing for somebody else who you may never meet, but you want them to understand. And you can't write it and then say, now let me explain what I wrote. Then you didn't write it sufficiently, right? I tell that to people all the time. Give me a paper, a document, a white paper, something. And they say, well, let me tell you what it means. No, you didn't write it accurately then. It was poor writing. You got to explain what you just wrote. And you printed the document and gave it to me. You might not write, just come tell it to me. Yeah, no, those skills have to be taught. It's skills based. And when you don't teach those skills sufficiently, the child goes through the process and just keeps getting promoted because they have birthdays. And they wind up in high school because they get to be 15 and a half and they can't be in 8th grade anymore. So there you go. Make it in high school.
Well, Doc,
You're not going to get promoted in high school just because you have birthdays.
You're right. Let me ask you this, and I first of all, I apologize because I said that was the last question, but I mean, there's so much knowledge and so much nuggets that you're giving us. You know, I have to ask you, or I'm going to burst, because I often enter conversations with people, especially now, with what we have happening in Washington, and there are some of my friends, Doc, that don't look like me in hue. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, well, you just don't like Obama, or you. I said, no, man, we're talking education here. It has nothing to do with not liking Obama, nothing to do with not liking Betsy DeVos. But if you listen to what these people are saying, Trump, they have no clue what education is, what should be happening to help correct the situation. They're just talking heads, and the children are on life support because you have people in charge that have no clue of what education really is and how to arrest it. And then they add insult to injury by not bringing in individuals like the George McKennas of the world. They go and get these same people that you're talking about that wrote this book about the culture of poverty because they have PhD behind their name, and they have no clue. But they refuse to talk to people that have proven track records of elevating and growing schools that people say it can't happen.
Well, I'll say it to you, I know we got to wrap up. Listen, I'll tell you that. That's going to always be a dilemma, because people, the whole country, the world, they think they know something about education because they've been to school, right? They've been to school, so they think they know something about education. Like, I know something about medicine. I was in a hospital once, so I can tell doctors, that's all they know. So I went to school, but you've never been a teacher. There's a big difference between going to school and actually running a school and being the educator. It's a big difference. And people have asked me, well, Doc, how come you don't write a book? And I've used a cop-out. I said, well, I'm too busy doing it to write about it, and which is true, right? Because to write a book, and you've written books, but it takes a lot of time to do that, and still do your day's job, right, while you're writing this book. And my frustration with writing a book, I wouldn't know I know so much, not because I'm smarter than anybody else, but what would I leave out? Because it's all connected, You can't talk about this part over here, you're talking about truancy. That's not the whole issue. or poverty, that's not the whole issue, right? Or the kid can't read. Well, that's not the whole issue. He doesn't know that mathematics either. And there's a difference between mathematics and arithmetic. Arithmetic is just add, subtract, multiply, and divide. That's all you can do, 4 things. Mathematics is knowing when to do it and how to work the word problems, which is, can you understand the words that they're asking you, right? Which is, can you read it? And can you write out a process for working the problem without even touching the numbers yet? Do you know how to work this problem from what you read? And all of that's the thinking process. You got to force that on kids so they don't just try to pick it up by osmosis. So it is hard. This thing is still hard. And fixing public education, I still say great teachers ought to be paid much more than we do because they're valuable in this community, in this society. Now with the distance learning, we have parents that email us, please come get your kids. They're talking about their own kids. They're in their house driving them crazy every day, right? Come get them, right? Bring them to school. You teach them. I can't teach these kids. And I understand that because they can't teach their own kids. Once they give birth to, right? 2 and 3 of them, they make them crazy. The teachers got 25, 30 of them. But that's what we're supposed to do. That's what we've been trained to do. I just don't think we're trained sufficiently. That's why we have professional development all the time, because it's a learning thing. We can keep learning. The teacher you were 10 years ago, you ought to be a better teacher 10 years later and 20 years later. You're too old. No, I got more wisdom and more strategies than you have. You're fresh off the boat. You don't, I mean, you're full of energy and vigor and all that. Yeah, I'm ready to go. But then what?
Listen, you said it. Then what? And that's, if I might allude to this, and I don't want to embarrass Mr. Burton, but that's what I think.
Is he raising his hand? Do you want to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Burton. Go ahead, Mr. Burton.
Well, if I were a black kid and I studied black history, and I look at about what's going on in our country now, I would be so angry and so bitter. I would play the role as a victim. The thing I've noticed about Melvin and some of the people that he deals with, they've ignored the racial injustice and they've gone ahead and got an education. Who and how are we going to teach these kids from feeling like they're a victim and they don't proceed above that or farther in that?
That's an excellent question, and it would take a lot longer for me to, there's no answer to that, but there's some responses I could make. It's easy to be a victim if you can identify a villain.
That's right.
And so once you identify a villain, you can call a lot of people a villain. You can call the priest a villain. You can call the priest a villain. You call a lot of people a villain, and I'm a victim by it, right? But everybody in that group, every teacher is not a villain. Every police officer is not a villain. Every legislator is not a villain. But the system often prevents you from getting what you call the adequate resources. The biggest question is, do we really want to educate these children? Because if they're undereducated, they stay at the bottom of the economic strata, which then validates the fact that those of us that are on top deserve to be here. We earned it by our birthright, as opposed to we earned it because of merit, because we oppressed other people. I've said in my very more active days, I would say, during slavery time, you can look at it from almost a philosophical or theological perspective. A slave owes it to the slave master to take that whip out of his hand and say, as long as you keep beating me, you're not going to heaven. So on behalf of your sorry soul, I'm going to take this whip away from you. Now, you might kill me for it, but I'm doing you a favor by telling you, you need to stop whipping me, because I'm not a chattel. I'm a human being. And if you keep miseducating me, then where do I have to go? Where can I go? And some of these kids are walking around, and you can tell. And I've used the phrase, they're like a dead child walking, like a dead man walking in the prison, You can see him, but he's averting his eye. Look at it, here he comes. I don't want him in my class. And he's not learning anything, but nobody's intervening. Nobody's saying, I've got to save his life because his life depends upon it. He's not going to get to come back here next year. He's going to keep going through the school process, and he's still going to be deficient in his skill sets. So how's he going to function in the world? He'll just do what he does. He'll do whatever the economy allows him to do to stay alive. He won't be a thriver. He'll be a survivor. And he might be surviving in the underground economy. But he might not last long enough. And these boys join gangs. And the gangs can be very powerful in their pull. They say things like, I'll die for you and I'll kill for you. And they mean that, right? And they show you people die. My mother never said, I'll die for you and I'll kill for you. And I love my mother more than anything on this planet. But she did say, I brought you here and I'll take you out. That scared the hell out of me. My mother never beat me, but she said stuff, you know, that would scare me. So, oh, Lord, I'll hurt my mother's feelings. But the education of our children is the most important role in a society. Educators, even if they say we need to be paid 3 times the money, would be able to produce 3 times the outcomes for the kids, or would we just be well compensated for mediocrity? And when I say that to my fellow colleagues, they say, oh, you don't understand. I say, yeah, I do understand. And some of us can teach, but all of us can't teach everybody. Teachers can teach, but can you teach all children? Very few people can teach all children. You can teach some children. And if we put you in the right place, you'll be very successful. Bring you on another side of town, you're going to be struggling. You can be a board certified and all that, all your plaques on the wall. But can you teach these kids in this neighborhood with their built-in deficiencies when they come to you, right? But you know that, so it's not a surprise. But don't make them act like they're victims and you're the villain. Can you emancipate them? Now that's hard to do, but that's your job. It is subject matter oriented, but it's also character building. It is belief in oneself. Why should I believe I can do these things? It's the teacher that inspires you, motivates you, makes you believe something you didn't believe was possible in yourself, give you projects to do. Teaching is a wonderful thing. And the rewards we get, at least that I got, was when the aha comes in. When I understand. You can't give me money for that, you know? Or they come back later and say, man, you know, you saved my life. That's all I needed, you know? At the time, he might have thought I was being hard on him or her, right? You're always fussing at me. Yeah, because you don't bring your work in. And you quit too easily, you know? And you won't stay after when I say, I'll help tutor you. Stay with me. No, you're not going home yet, you know? Call your mom. I'll call your mom and tell you you're going to be late. You still don't understand these concepts. So you come after school. I'm not coming. Yeah, you are. Because I'm not giving up. You have to be persistent with them, you know? It's like parenting, you know? I don't have any children. I never was a parent. I tried to get married. I did get married one time. Didn't work. I said, I'm not going to try that again. So I didn't have to go through the blues twice, right? It was a painful thing. But anyway, so I've been raising everybody else's kids. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it very much. It's a blessing to be able to be in the lives of so many children. And now I'm on the school board. I never wanted to be a political elected official. People say, well, you're a politician. Now, no, I'm not. I'm an educator who had to run for office because the previous lady died in office. She dropped dead. And the community came to me, George, you got to run. I was retired. I was at home, minding my business. Didn't have to put my pants on if I didn't want to in the morning. Now I got to get up, you know. And I'm wearing pants now, Melvin, you know. The people say, what you wearing? I might not have any pants on, but you can't see. All this, see this part. But the point is that I'm an elected official and I make policy. My challenge is that on my board, every board member is elected in their own area so that we're not monolithic in our thinking. Mm-hmm. So we disagree about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And so you have to find this board majority in order to pass policy that'll be implemented on behalf of kids. It's not easy. The fight will never be over. As I say, la lucha continue. Struggle continues. And, you know, when I was younger and I saw Brown v. Board of Education, I was a child and it passed. So, oh, man, that's great. In 10 years, we'll have this stuff fixed. Well, 10 years came and went. Many times, Melvin. Many times. I'm really mature now.
Okay.
We still haven't fixed it. We haven't fixed it. Thank you for the time, brother. I appreciate it.
Now, well, listen, Dr. McKenna, I want to thank you, but
Hi, Dr. McKenna.
I want, okay, this
Hi,
is
baby.
my, this is my beautiful wife, Doc,
Hey,
and she's a huge fan, and she was not going to be satisfied until she came on the scene.
Nothing wrong. That's okay. She's not a photo bomber. I know who she is.
Okay, I know. Listen, Doc, well, first of all, I want our audience to go to Netflix, guys. This movie right now is showing on Netflix. It's called Hard Lessons. It's about
the original movie was called The George McKenna Story.
Yes, yes.
And after 20 years, they lost the what they call the patent rights on it. So then they changed it to Hard Lessons. But you can look up either George McKenna Story or Hard Lessons. It's the same movie. They just changed the name, and somebody else is marketing it now. Yeah.
Right. So, guys, we want you guys to go out and to check that movie out. And Dr. McKenna, I have said to my friends and colleagues that have gone to watch the movie, they've been very excited about it. And I've said two things to them, and I've said to you a while back, and I want to repeat it again for our new audience. It's simply this. If people are wondering why maybe they haven't heard about the George McKenna story that was aired in 1986, I have to be very honest here and very blunt, is that when you have a situation like we have right now with non-accountability and perceptions that float out there of what it takes to elevate our children. And this is no knock on Mr. Clark. I admire the brother. I think he did a wonderful job. But Mr. Clark fits the stereotype, yelling and screaming and showing.
You're talking about the guy with the bullhorn and the baseball bat, right?
Yes.
So
he fits the stereotype. So it's much easier to say, okay, that's what it takes to help those kids than it is to have a George McKenna who is the polar opposite. However, more effective. I worked for Dr. George McKenna, okay? So I'm there firsthand. And I want people to take time and watch this movie because it tears down a lot of stereotypes that you have to be belligerent and overly boisterous and that kind of thing to reach our children. That is really, to me, a huge part of the lesson in this movie. Secondly, Mr. McKenna, I want people to watch this movie because they need to see Black men being progressive, moving our children forward. They need to hear our children looking for growth. Mr. Burton asked a question about guys that look like me sometimes playing the victim. And I think you did an excellent job answering that question, Doc. And we know some of them will play the victim because, as you said, it's easy to play the victim when you have someone you can blame for your circumstances. So it's a lot easier instead of doing the work. And sometimes we know circumstances are different and that kind of thing, which you said that would be another whole 2 or 3 more shows to explain. However, as our guests are here with us and as we want to be courteous and not hold you all night, Dr. McKenna, I want to thank you so very much for your diligence and for your care. And again, I want to say publicly that we're still praying with you and for you. We know there may have been some personal medical issues. I hope I'm not stepping out of line by saying that.
Well, I'm fine now. I was struggling for a little while.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay, I just want to say that. Mr. Burton, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Oh no, I stopped at a hotel spending the night in Ardmore, Oklahoma, so I can stop and listen to this program. So
thank you.
I'm just moving around trying to get comfortable in this hotel chair.
Okay.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, listen, you have just watched an epic show. The Nobody Asked Me Guy show is proud to have had Dr. George McKenna on with us. I know that many of you will be hitting me with emails and that kind of thing, asking questions. Dr. McKenna, are there any parting words that would you like to leave our audience, if they would like to contact you, or if you'd like them to contact you through me, if you have some parting words.
Through you would be better, because I get swamped every day. I get so many emails I can't, and nowadays I don't even have secretarial help. So I'm on my own now because I can't go to the office, you know, with distancing. But I'm willing to help and talk to anybody if I can, if they need, you know, suggestions and things. I don't think I'm an expert on anything, but I'm experienced in a lot of stuff. And when you get experienced, you know what not to do, right? Because that didn't work, right? So you can waste your time doing a lot of stuff that won't work. And that's that old adage, experience is the best teacher. Learning from somebody with experience is an even better teacher. You can keep from getting yourself hurt. It's like you never rode a motorcycle. Somebody buys you a brand new motorcycle and you jump on it and break your leg running into a wall. You should have talked to somebody who's got a motorcycle so they can show you how to use this motorcycle. So talking to people with experience and sharing those experiences and watching them perform their work as educators and stuff like that, and listening to the philosophers and the theorists, like you say, at the end of the ivory towers, and they write their books, because every generation, every 10 years, here comes another wave of experts, right? Here they come, right? They don't know me, I don't know them, but they say that we got the answers right here. Right? We got the horse right here. His name is Paul Revere. No, you don't. You just think you do. The kids are the same. The circumstances change, their faces change, but the circumstance, when you still have underperforming schools and they've been in the same neighborhood all this time, and we don't believe that's a pandemic. We don't see anything with that. We've normalized that. Even as Black people, we don't need to take this, so we go someplace else. And the charter schools allow them to do this. I'm not mad at them, but I expect to get a better outcome than they're getting the same results that they did from the school they just ran away from. We have a tendency to run away from this to that, and we believe that that is better. And if it's affluence, we're going to run over there and it'll rub off on us some kind of way. You can be miseducated any place if the teacher doesn't care about you. Like I said, I'd rather be segregated like I was and well-educated, which I was, than integrated and miseducated. Thank you, Melvin. God bless you, brother.
Thank you very much. Mr. Burton, thank you, and all of our guests. Thank you for joining us, guys. And please come back every Friday night, 7 p.m. We always have great guests here. And so feel free to be on the lookout as we advertise who are our guests or be. We never like to give you a heads up. We like you to be surprised. So have a great night. Dr. McKenna, it's been great having you here on the Nobody Asked Me Guys show. And Dr. Burton, thank you very much for joining us. And it's been great. You guys have a great night.